Jake had always been a cowboy. He grew up on the open plains, surrounded by the wide skies and the never-ending horizon. His life had always been simple, working with cattle, mending fences, and living in the small cabin on his ranch. But everything changed when his wife Sarah passed away. The illness had come quickly, and despite the doctor's best efforts, there was nothing that could be done. Sarah was gone, and Jake was left with only the memories of their time together. For the first few months, Jake couldn't stand to be around the cabin. The silence was deafening, and the empty spaces reminded him too much of her absence. He tried to keep busy, working harder than ever on the ranch, but the loneliness was unbearable. His neighbors, though friendly, couldn't fill the void Sarah had left behind. His friends, the other cowboys, could only do so much. None of them knew what it was like to lose someone so dear. Months passed, and Jake's grief slowly turned into a dull ache. He had come to terms with the fact that Sarah would never walk through the door again. Still, every evening as the sun sank below the horizon, he would sit outside his cabin thinking of her. He had no one to share his days with, no one to share his life. The thought of moving on felt impossible. One day, while tending to his cattle, Jake found himself far from his usual path. He had been distracted, lost in his thoughts, when he suddenly realized that the sun was already beginning to set. He had wandered deeper into the hills than he intended, and now he was far from home, with only a handful of cattle to guide him. The path back would take longer than he had expected. As he guided the cattle toward home, a strange feeling settled in his gut. It was a feeling of being watched, a sensation that he couldn't shake. He shrugged it off, telling himself it was just the wind playing tricks on him. But the feeling only grew stronger as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the land. Suddenly, Jake heard the sound of hooves approaching from behind. He turned just in time to see a group of men riding toward him. His instincts kicked in and he reached for his rifle, but it was too late. The men were too close and they were already drawing their weapons. Jake could tell that this wasn't just a friendly greeting. These men meant trouble. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, smiled at Jake. "You're far from home, cowboy," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "What's a man like you doing out here all alone?" Jake didn't answer. He had no intention of making small talk with these men. His mind raced, trying to figure out a way out of this situation. He knew the hills well, and if he could just make it to the trees, he might be able to escape. But before he could move, the leader's voice called out again, this time with an edge of anger. "You think you can run? We've got you surrounded." Without warning, the men rode closer, and one of them reached for Jake's rifle. A fight broke out, fast and violent. Jake fought with everything he had, but the odds were against him. His blows landed, but they were met with fists and knives. The sharp sting of steel cut through his shirt, and Jake felt the warm rush of blood pouring from a wound across his side. His vision blurred, and the world around him seemed to spin. As the bandits pressed on, Jake could feel his strength waning. His body ached, and the world was growing darker. Just when he thought he could hold on no longer, everything went black. When Jake woke up, the first thing he noticed was the warmth. He wasn't lying on the cold, hard ground anymore. He was wrapped in something soft, and there was a faint scent of herbs in the air. His eyes fluttered open, and he was greeted by the sight of a fire crackling nearby. He tried to sit up, but quickly realized that his body felt weak, and his side burned with pain. A voice broke through the haze of confusion. "Easy now, cowboy. You're safe." Jake turned his head and saw a woman kneeling beside him. She was young, with dark hair tied back in a braid and strong, steady eyes. Who are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "My name's Taya," she said gently. "And you're lucky we found you." Jake tried to gather his thoughts, but his head was spinning. "What happened? Where am I?" "You're with us now," Taya replied. "We found you out there near the hills. You were close to death, but we brought you here to our camp. You're safe now." Jake's mind raced. Who were these people? He had never seen them before. The wilderness was vast, and he had no idea where he was. But something in Taya's voice told him that he could trust her. Who are you?" Jake asked again, his voice barely a whisper. Taya smiled softly. "We're Apache. I, Taya, and my sisters, Tala and Aylin, found you. We couldn't just leave you out there." Jake was silent for a moment, trying to piece everything together. He had been attacked, and now he was with 3 Apache women. The world seemed unreal, and his mind was having trouble making sense of it all. But as he looked around at the small camp, he realized that he wasn't in any danger. These women had saved him, and for that he owed them his life. As the days passed, Jake's condition improved. He was still weak, but the Apache women cared for him, treating his wounds with herbs and bandages. Taya explained how their people lived in the hills, away from the towns and cities. They had their own ways, their own customs, but they were kind-hearted people. They didn't want to harm anyone. They only helped those in need. Jake spent hours talking with Taya, Tala, and Aylin, learning about their lives, their culture, and their experiences. The more he listened, the more he realized how much he had in common with these women. They too had known loss and hardship. But despite everything, they had survived, and they had a strength that Jake admired. Though his wounds were healing, Jake still felt like a stranger in their world. He wasn't sure what his future held, but one thing was certain. These women had saved him, and he would never forget their kindness. As the days turned into weeks, Jake's feelings began to shift. The loneliness he had once known seemed to fade away, replaced by a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt in years. The Apache women had become a part of his life in ways he hadn't expected, and he found himself drawn to them. The bond between them was growing, and Jake didn't know what to make of it. But deep down he knew that his life had changed forever. These 3 Apache women had saved him from certain death, and now they had become something more. Something he didn't fully understand yet, but was beginning to feel in his heart. As the days went by, Jake's strength returned, but his mind was still occupied with the events that had led him to the Apache women's camp. He had never imagined that his life would take such a turn. A few weeks ago, he had been a lonely cowboy on his ranch, and now he was surrounded by 3 strong and kind Apache women who had saved his life. He couldn't help but wonder what the future held for him. The bond between Jake and the 3 women, Taya, Tala, and Aylin, grew stronger with each passing day. They had become more than just his caretakers. They had become his friends, his confidants, and in many ways they felt like family. They had shared their lives with him, telling him stories about their tribe, their traditions, and their connection to the land. Jake listened intently, fascinated by their way of life. It was so different from his own, yet there was something about it that felt right. As Jake recovered, he helped with tasks around the camp, though his strength was still limited. He learned how to hunt with a bow and arrow, how to gather herbs, and how to track animals in the wild. Taya, Tala, and Aylin taught him everything they knew, and in return, Jake shared his own knowledge. He taught them how to ride horses more efficiently, and even showed them a few techniques he had learned from years of working on his ranch. One evening, as the fire crackled in the center of their camp, Jake sat with the 3 women, his mind still filled with thoughts of his past and the life he had left behind. Taya noticed that he was quiet, lost in his thoughts, and she gently placed her hand on his arm. "You're thinking about your life before, aren't you?" she asked softly. Jake looked at her, surprised by how well she could read him. He nodded slowly. "I can't help it. I've spent so much of my life alone, and now I find myself here with all of you. It feels strange, but in a good way." Taya smiled warmly. "You don't have to explain, Jake. We understand. We have all been through hardships in our lives. But here with us, you don't have to be alone anymore. We've saved you, and in a way, you've saved us too." Jake's heart swelled at her words. He had never expected to find such kindness and understanding, especially from people he had once thought were so different from him. These women had saved him when he was at his lowest, and now they were offering him a place in their lives. He didn't know if he was ready to accept that fully, but the idea of being part of their world felt comforting. Tala, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "Jake, we know you're not used to this way of life, but it's more than just surviving out here. It's about living in harmony with nature, with the earth. We live by the land, and the land gives us everything we need. There is peace in it if you're willing to find it." Jake listened carefully to her words. He had always been a cowboy working with cattle, but he had never truly understood the connection between people and the land the way Tala did. She had a wisdom in her that was hard to ignore. "Maybe I've been too focused on what I've lost," Jake said after a pause. "I've never really thought about what I still have, but you're right. There's something about this place, about you 3, that makes me feel like I'm part of something bigger, something more important." Aylin, who had been sitting quietly, finally spoke. "Jake, we're not just helping you survive. We're showing you the way we live, the way we see the world. You're not just our guest here. You're becoming one of us. We feel that in our hearts." Jake looked around the campfire at the 3 women. They had saved his life, yes, but they had also given him something he hadn't realized he needed, a sense of belonging. He had been a lone cowboy for so long, lost in his grief, and now he was part of something much more meaningful than just his old life. The thought of it was overwhelming, and for the first time in years he felt at peace. The days turned into weeks, and Jake's connection with the three Apache women only deepened. They spent their time together in the quiet of the wilderness, learning from each other and growing closer as a family. Jake had never felt such a sense of unity, not even when he had been married to Sarah. This was different, and it was beginning to feel like home. But as his bond with the women grew, Jake began to notice something else. His feelings for them were changing. He wasn't sure when it had happened, but he found himself drawn to each of them in different ways. Taya's wisdom and strength, Tala's quiet grace, and Aylin's fierce independence all called to him in ways he couldn't explain. He didn't know how to handle these feelings. It was one thing to be grateful for their help and admire them for their strength, but these feelings went deeper. He hadn't expected to feel this way, but there was no denying the attraction he felt for them. Each day he found himself more and more drawn to them, and the thought of being with them in a different way began to settle in his heart. One evening, as the four of them sat by the fire, the air thick with the warmth of the flames, Jake spoke up. "I don't know what to say, but I feel like I owe all of you so much. You've saved me, not just from dying out there, but from being alone, and I can't help but feel like I don't just want to be a part of this family. I want more. I don't know how to explain it, but I can't ignore it anymore." The three women exchanged glances, and Taya smiled softly. "Jake, you don't need to explain. We know, we've all felt it too. We saved you, but you've also saved us. You brought something into our lives that we didn't even know we were missing. We have all grown to care for you deeply, in a way that goes beyond friendship or gratitude." Jake felt his heart race as the women leaned in closer. They had always been kind to him, but this felt different. He had never expected anything like this to happen, but as he looked into their eyes, he realized that they felt the same way. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something much more meaningful. Tala reached out, taking his hand in hers. "We've each been through so much in our lives," she said quietly. "And now we've found something special in you. You're not just our friend, Jake. You're more than that." Aylin nodded, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "We care for you, Jake, more than you know. And we want you to know that no matter what, you'll never be alone again." In that moment, Jake understood. He wasn't just saved from death. He had been given a second chance, not just at life, but at love. The love of these three women, who had seen something in him that he hadn't even seen in himself. As the fire burned down to embers, Jake felt a peace in his heart that he hadn't felt in years. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to embrace whatever came next, with them by his side.